has a professional product you can rely on. From a small vacuum to a large ride-on scrubber dryer, from a high-pressure washer to a steam cleaner. With over 80 years' experience producing professional cleaning products, Karcher has the solution you require. What's more, up until the 31st of October, you can claim up to €300 in cashback across our professional range. T's and C's apply. Visit karcher.ie or your local dealer for more information.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now you're welcome back. So later than advertised, we'll get through the Sunday Papers and I'll start with the back pages. Headline of the day goes to Kevin Byrne in The Sun. Sham playing football. Seat mix-up has Kenny frustrated. A picture there of Stephen Kenny scratching his head, not too happy, as you can imagine, upon finding out that Aaron Connolly and Adam Ida were out of Thursday's game. We have the back page of the Mail on Sunday then. Washed away. Crowd hopes set to be consumed by second wave. Shane McGrath here. And he's just making the point that any notion that crowds might be at games washed away by this second wave. I mean, will the games themselves survive is the question. Alan Minton on this show during the week of the GAA used the word forfeit pretty liberally. Fergal McGill absolutely backed that up yesterday. So that is where we are when it comes to the Inter-County Championship this winter. And alongside that, Kenny confirms that players moved seats on aeroplane. This is obviously the sham playing football. Aaron Connolly, Adam Ida, Philip Quinn here left their allocated seats on the Ireland team flight to Bratislava on Tuesday and sat within 2 metres of the FAI official who tested positive for COVID-19 in Slovakia the next day. Sunday Independent then. Ian Henderson here at the top. Henderson's red card, a headache for Farrell as Healy finds his range again. So this is Ian Henderson red carded yesterday for Ulster, which may well rule him out of the Italian game for Ireland. He's got a virtual hearing this week. And the Healy finding his range again is Munster's Healy, Ben Healy, doing very well for Munster again. Second week in a row, looking very assured alongside Craig Casey, who was man of the match. So Munster's younger players doing well of late. And then plain, as in Plane, plain truth uncomfortable for Kenny. Connolly and Ida were forced to miss crucial Slovakia tie after they swapped seats on flight. John Brennan there writing about that beneath that. Sunday Times, John Delaney. Who else? The Delaney Files, exclusive, what the Mazars report reveals about disgraced FAI chief. So the Sunday Times duo Paul Rowan and Mark Tighe have had a look at the draft Mazars report. The cosy one is the one, I know all these reports are hard to keep track of. The cosy one is the one with the guards and the authorities at the moment. The Mazars one is the report commissioned by the FAI themselves. We'll touch on some of what's in there. Sunday Mirror, it's a picture of Adam Ida and Aaron Connolly. Ryle High Club. Kenny fuming over playoff blunder as star duo sat in the wrong plane seats. So the theme is consistent across the papers, and Sunday World no different. Plain, as in P-L-A-N-E, plain crazy. Ireland duo missed game because they moved seats. That's John Brennan again on the back page. And Paul McGrath inside, I fear for Kenny. Paul McGrath not so sure that the Kenny approach is the right one. We'll get to that. We have with us Cliona Foley, journalist, presenter of the Off the Bench podcast, amongst other things, and Colm Keys of the Irish Independent with us as well. Afternoon, Cliona. Afternoon, Colm. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Joe. Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing very well. There is a sense, Cliona, in broad terms, second wave, it's coming, it's unrelenting, and sport will be the victim once again very soon. I don't know if you share that feeling. It's ominous at the moment.
It is, yeah, and I noticed even the Patriots and the Broncos in NFL is getting hit again. And when you see the big professional sports who are taking, you presume, you know, the absolute utmost of care on it, then for us, when you know, sports of amateur sports like the GAA are of such importance to us, you really do think this is not as straightforward as anybody ever thought it was going to be. I don't think anybody ever thought it was going to be. But particularly with our rising rates, the rising rates above the border in Ulster and Ulster football for GAA, it's getting very serious, I think.
Yeah, we'll come to GAA in a moment. Obviously, the back page is dominated by the Republic of Ireland situation. So a player testing positive in the last 24 hours, and Callum Robinson, John Egan, Alan Brown and Callum O'Dowda all deemed close contacts. So they missed the game today. Totally separate to all of that, it turns out the official who joined the team and flew out to Bratislava and tested positive, that was a false positive, but it obviously meant Connolly and Ida missed the game, which was very unfortunate. And then it turns out that they missed the game in part because they moved seats. So Neil O'Riordan here in The Sun explains things very, very well. He talks about the innocent decision to take 2 free seats at the back of the plane would, under normal circumstances, have made no odds. Unfortunately, it was the final piece in a COVID-19 jigsaw which saw the pair ruled out. He goes on to say the seating plan for the charter flight followed normal lines. Management team placed at the front, players behind them, backroom staff then seated to the rear half of the cabin, and the final rows reserved for the FAI officials. On this occasion, only Gary Owens and Jerry McEnany travelled, but they boarded the flight after the players, and it's understood Connolly and Ida spotted 2 free seats at the back and took them. Given it was only Connolly's 4th and Ida's 2nd away trip with the senior squad, they may not have been familiar with the regular seating arrangements. So, in part, it's not as if they had names on their seats and you must sit here for COVID reasons. It's just the general tradition is management, then players, then backroom staff, then officials, and the 2 lads had the seats at the back of the bus and they decided let's go down and take them because that's just what young lads do. And unfortunately it turned out they were next to what would turn out to be a false positive, but it ruled them out of the game. It just makes it all a bit messy, Colm.
Well, Joe, you're talking about all sports, and this is Ireland's flagship international team, and I think we're getting a pretty decent look into how it may play out for other teams, and especially in GAA when there's a lot more movement than there has been. It just shows how many layers to this there can be. Obviously, by my reckoning there, and is it 7 players have now been ruled out for COVID-related between positives, between close contacts, and then close contacts of a false positive, and then close contacts of a positive. So 7 players are all knocked out of a Nations Cup game. It just shows the difficulties, the layers of all of this, the precautions that have to be taken, the vigilance required just to get a fixture. And it's really, really difficult. And as cases increase in this country and in the UK, I think we're going to see a lot more difficulty, obviously, over the next few weeks. And sport will do very, very well to be able to thread a path through all of this. So this is a decent insight, I think, to how it's going to play out as cases rise. Unfortunate, obviously, that 2 lads leave the seat. Who hasn't done it on a plane? And maybe, subconsciously, they probably had forgotten about thinking everything is okay here, and they moved to the back, and there's no one there to point out otherwise. Clearly, no one there to point out otherwise. You must stay where you are. But I was listening to you earlier on there, and the issue over the 3 and 4 planes required to charter the team around. If that's the case, there are other stories here relating to a cash-strapped FAI, as we know. It is almost impossible, whatever way. These guys are used to probably a higher standard of travel arrangement with their clubs. Just hasn't probably played out here, and they've been caught. Yeah. So it's unfortunate, and it's impacting. Obviously, has an impact on the team. Is it 13 we're missing? Still put up a decent performance earlier. Again, that is probably in line with Thursday night. But again, the absence of goals, and these all will feed into maybe a negativity there that's going to be difficult to ward against.
Yeah, I'll just play a clip for people who didn't catch it of Gary Owens. This is him speaking. Cliona, you can pick up on the back of this, but he was speaking earlier. And look, there's 2 issues here. The one, there's the initial blame. How much blame we can really throw at people in a pandemic when this thing is so contagious is for everyone else to decide. But certainly, look, they didn't sit where they were meant to sit. So there's a degree of blame, be it for the players themselves or FAI senior officials not putting them in the correct seat. So there's what happened over the last few days. But going forward, so Gary Owens here is pretty upfront. I had put him to him a point Dan McDonald had made, which was that certain squad members didn't like the size of the plane or felt there should have been a second plane. So here's Gary Owens' response to that point.
Well, we're looking. I mean, the reality is that there was 53 on the plane. If we followed those guidelines, we would have needed 4 planes. We would have only been able to fit 16 on the plane. And I think, Joe, that needs to form part of a review. We will look at that. But it's we're using the same plane that international teams are using. In fact, Wales are actually going home on the same plane that we travelled on.
Sure.
So I think it's it would be a huge financial burden for international teams if you have to comply with the 2-metre rule on the plane, and I'm not sure that's financially sustainable. And I think that needs to be fed in as well as part of the review with UEFA and HSE.
4 planes, Cliona.
I think that notion of 4 planes is ridiculous. I think, if you take every precaution, they're tested before they leave, they're tested when they land, they know what the rules are. I thought Neil O'Riordan made a very good point just about maybe the inexperience of the 2 players who were involved, for the Thursday night game. But look, anybody who's ever coached and brought kids, even young kids on a team bus, you do look behind you occasionally. I'm just surprised that, nobody looked back and saw them, or nobody brought it to their attention. That does seem a bit strange to me. Do you just get on a plane, put your headphones on now and not care about where everybody's seated or what's happening? So I do think maybe, it isn't just the players, the 2 players involved in that case that were at fault. But again, yeah, he's right. That number of people on the plane and they're cash strapped, and everybody has to change their behaviour now, and that includes professional athletes. They know at this stage that some things are possible and some things aren't. And I'm surprised to hear that notion that there would be, But I suppose what's really strange, Joe, for everybody is that everything everywhere is different. Look at the under-21s. Look at the fact that there were 31,000 down in Wellington watching a Bledisloe Cup yesterday, and you're going, well, how can they do that and we can do this? And so I think that whole comparative thing makes it really difficult. Sometimes people just need to focus on what's happening in the here and now. And for professional footballers, I suppose, and for people who are managing them, you would think that they would have. I just was surprised that nobody looked back and didn't see that those players had moved. I thought that's like a coach getting on the team bus and never checking what's happening behind you. And I think you would normally.
Yeah, it's true. I guess the worrying thing for the FAI here, Colm, is on the flight back, on the flight home, everything was done correctly. The players sat where they were meant to sit, and yet the bubble was burst. There was a positive, and actually that positive took out another 4 players alongside him. So what do you do then?
It's a real, as I said earlier, it's a real eye-opener to how this, and I'm sure as much as they're going to review Ida and Conley, I'm quite sure they will review this quite intensely to see, obviously with the HSE, to see, where is the source of this. And I think a lot of other teams would be interested to know, well, how does a player on a trip like that has been in a bubble, in a camp like that, how do you pick it up? It's obviously community transmission in some way, or unless there's another, unless it was picked up over there, we can't be sure of that, obviously. One of the things that struck me was I just got the sense from Stephen Kenny, and I think this has been reflected in the morning's interviews in all the papers from yesterday, was he didn't seem too pleased that the official in question was actually on the trip. Didn't see him as a critical part of it. And Gary Owens, he refuted that really this morning. Said he was a critical part of it. But in all the interviews, that does come across as Stephen Kenny's main source of ire. That there was really no need for this official to be on the plane in the first place. But it's obviously something in the course of your interview earlier that has been rebuffed. Yeah, well, if you need a communications person on the ground, it's a UEFA stipulation, so he has to be there. I mean, I suspect they'll be going through the 53 names and seeing. It suddenly struck me afterwards, I should have asked Gary if he needed to be there, or if Jerry McEnany needed to be there. But I mean, that 53 is going to have to be trimmed unless they're getting 4 flights. So that's where Stephen Kenny's speaking to the press now. This thing will rumble on. They have a game in Finland, like another flight, and I see that Naby Keita and 4 of his teammates for Guinea have tested positive for COVID now. The clubs are going to have something to say about all this when this international break is over and players get back. It's one thing, this Premier League bubble, Cliona, and they managed to stay together, but crisscrossing across Europe in the midst of a second wave and then globally, this is a bad first test run, you would have to say, so far.
It is, and I mean, some of us, I suppose, sniggered a bit at the notion of the government using influencers to affect the behaviour or try to affect the behaviour or the kind of the seriousness of the situation for younger people who mightn't. So maybe what's happened with the football team will bring it home to some younger people who are football fans, that this thing is absolutely virulent and you can pick it up extraordinarily easily and mysteriously at times as well. Just on a lighter note, if we can accept that there might be a lighter note, I thought Eamon Sweeney had a great line in the Sunday Indo, and he said it's true that we lack a Robbie Keane figure these days, but even Robbie wouldn't have been able to do much either if he'd been sitting 30 centimetres too close to a COVID-19 case. The HSE are apparently the markers no striker can shake off.
Yeah, I wonder, will the FAI sit down with the HSE and ask for that 2 metre stipulation to be relaxed for plane journeys? I think that's something that they're going to do, I suspect. On the footballing front then, so Ireland have since drawn 0-0 with Wales, and it was another similar-ish performance, it seems, to the other night. Played very well, didn't take chances. So even just in front of me here, for instance, page 3 of the Sunday Independent, I think, barring Paul McGrath, Cliona, which I'll ask you about in a second, the consensus is that Ireland played very well. So like Eamon Sweeney says, 2 wasted years have cost Ireland. And he says, geez, imagine if Stephen Kenny had had more time with this team. And he writes, doing an impression of Meg Ryan in a deli every time the team won a corner, which is quite the image. Mick McCarthy insisted that Ireland score when we get crosses in. As he listed off occasions when this happened on his watch, the casual observer might have been forgiven for believing that the goals had rained in when he was in charge. The truth is different. In group stages, only 12 of the 55 teams involved, all of the minnows, scored fewer goals than Ireland. We scored the same amount as Luxembourg, half as many as Armenia, 9 fewer than Albania. So what Mick should really have said on commentary was that during his reign, Ireland only scored when we got crosses in. Most of the time we hardly scored at all. So he says, Eamon Sweeney, the last time Ireland created this many chances away from home against serious opposition was that France playoff in Paris for the World Cup 11 years ago. And Tommy Conlon talks about general goodwill. A goalless draw after 120 minutes, followed by an exit on penalties, couldn't dampen the consensus that this was a performance worth praising. The reason's obvious enough. Ireland played well. It wasn't just they'd competed hard, for this is usually guaranteed, but they had passed the ball to each other in a coherent, integrated fashion. You couldn't call it advanced tiki-taka, but they were showing signs of literacy in the genre, if not full fluency. So that seems to, I think, capture the consensus across a lot of the papers. You spotted Paul McGrath, though, Cliona.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a man who expresses terribly seriously strong, very strong opinions, but he really does today. Like the headline is in the Sunday World, his column, and he does one every week. Kenny tactics just won't succeed is the headline, and basically that's what he comes down to. He basically says, I'm not convinced we have the talent to pass our way through international quality defence. And he just really goes really strong on the fact that yes, football's changed, but have we the players at this level? And he seems to indicate really that he thinks that Kenny should be using more a mixture of tactics, and that passing that very modern European passing style is going to work, if you like, because we don't have the quality of players basically. And a lot of people have written this over the last few weeks, including Paul Rowan had a great line a couple of weeks ago as well about what Kenny is talking about, but what players are capable of. And he, in this piece as well, Paul McGrath says he looks at the particular case of Shane Duffy, I suppose, and he says, he said had Slovakia been able to field a full team on Thursday night, Ireland would have been up against players from Inter Milan, Lazio, and one who left Napoli last year after a great career. When was the last time any of those clubs showed a sign of any interest in Irish international? He's pointing out it was Robbie Keane. So to prosper at international level, he's saying we have to beat players in those clubs without having any such talent of our own. Is knocking the ball around to the feet and trying to pass it into net the way to go? Not for me, it isn't, Paul McGrath says. Yeah, he cited Jack Grealish and just talked about whipping in a few crosses and looking for a bit more nuance. We need to mix it up a bit. I don't know, Colm, it's sacrilege to almost disagree with anything Paul McGrath might say about football, given his status in the game. But you look at the Harahan chance created the other night, you look at Brown hitting the post, like they actually did create chances. Today, Stevens whipped in a cross for Shane Long. To be fair, that may be what Paul McGrath's advocating. Brady had a cross for Duffy, his outstretched leg. There were a couple of other chances today and the other night. It doesn't really strike me that the issue is creating chances. It's just we don't really have anyone to finish them. I'm not sure anyone can do much about that. That's not really an issue of approach.
And that has been the case over the previous 2 managements as well, albeit they did not try to pass their way, as Paul has put it, through other teams. Certainly, Ireland have become more watchable, even this afternoon, but on Thursday night particularly, have become more watchable. So that'll draw in more people, maybe bring people back to watching them. But there's a tolerance level too, Joe, that will be there for 0-0 draws, in the same way that there was a tolerance level it's quickly began to fade as well for 1-1 draws that Ireland had so many, and that will reach its peak pretty quickly. And Ireland really have to find a way to score, to create and convert those chances. I know that's an obvious statement, but the goodwill will soon fade. Of course it will, because Ireland are not scoring goals. And, it's a style war, really. If it means that Ireland win 1-0 by scoring from a corner or a free or whatever it is, pretty soon the balance will tilt back in favour of that approach. If we do actually start to win games as a nation, as a national team, start to win games again and qualify in advance, I do think there will be a tipping point and will come much sooner. And I think the slack that Stephen Kenny has been cut here and will continue for a while, but it won't last forever. And it's certainly another 0-0 draw during the week, and I think we'll hear a lot more about it. But for the moment, yes, the team are watchable. They're very much trying to play an attractive game. Whether it's an effective game for Ireland remains to be seen. You would have to say after 390 minutes without a goal, so far you'd say not.
I suppose once they're creating chances, Cliona, is the issue. If they were passing the ball around and weren't creating anything, then you'd say this is really not working. The fact that they're creating, you would just think law of averages. Conor Heron will not miss that type of chance the next 99 times.
Yeah, well, on Thursday night, my criticism would have been that they weren't moving off the ball enough. I didn't think there was half enough movement off the ball up front. But in fact, they look better today. Philip Quinn has a good piece today, Joe, as well on this. And he actually likens Kenny's position to Joe Schmidt when he started with Leinster, where he only had, I think, one win out of 4 games and he was under pressure. So, and Philip Quinn says in the Mail that, Kenny has to get a win. You know what I mean? It's not enough to be just, getting draws. And we still have only, 1 goal in 400 minutes of football. And that was from a set piece. So that is the question that's going to come. I noticed even on, social media during the week, there was a lot of people asking, all the journalists aren't being hard enough, if you like, as Colm says, they're cutting Kenny a lot of slack. Partly, I think, because he's very straight, and I suppose the Irish media know him, and we know what his background is, and we know where he comes from. But Colm's absolutely right. The reality is, and all of these games, of course, are important in relation to future World Cup hopes and seeding and all the rest. So they're going to have to start finishing those. And Shane Duffy was very honest after the game today. He said, I'm quoting him here, he said, same old story. We just couldn't finish chances. So they've got to finish them.
One of the things about Philip's piece in relation to Joe Smith taking over at Leinster, and he had a rocky start, but behind all of that was a really rich pool of talent, some of the best players in Europe that he was able to work with and obviously cultivate, and it came pretty quickly. I don't think Stephen Kenny is going to be afforded the same luxuries here or anything like it. So I think from that point of view, Ireland really are at the bottom of the hill and really starting to climb. But how quickly that climb is going to be, I think there'll be a lot of difficulty, and particularly up front. That's really where it has to turn. But I do think impatience will kick in as quick as it has with other management soon enough.
No, I suspect you're probably right, and we're clinging on to second seeds in the World Cup groups now, and we could do with a win or 2 or 3 over the next couple of weeks, because if we get off to a bad start in the World Cup group and suddenly it's like 4 years till the next Euros, there will be doom, a sense of doom about the whole thing. But I would agree with the consensus that it's been a positive start in so many ways. We've only got like a minute or 2 here before the news headlines, so I'm just going to pick out something which is short and not so sweet. Cliona, I know you spotted it in the Sunday Times. They do anatomy of ... different sports person, generally towards the back of the sports section. It's not something we touch on that much. It's often kind of interesting, and visually it's kind of a cool thing. Like, I'll hold up Dylan Hartley here if you're streaming. So it's like that most weeks, anatomy of a player, and they go through their injury profile or different aspects of them. In his own words, I've had bulging disc problems for years. I still try to run through them when the drugs didn't work. I have fractured the shoulder blade. I've sustained nerve damage. Every now and again, I experience pins and needles. I creak since I have to keep moving to minimize problems in my lower back and my hip. I walk downstairs sideways most mornings. I'm constantly creaking my neck. I struggle to wipe my backside the morning after a match because I'm so stiff. I had to glue a crease in my bald spot together after one match. My fingers ache continually. My left thumb doesn't work because it's no tendon in it. I suffered ligament damage in a match against the Springboks, and I've had 6 different types of injury related to my hands and wrists, and I've learned to strap them like a boxer. There you go, Cliona.
It's pretty shocking stuff. The one that caught my eye was 1,320 days of his career were lost through injury, and now 320 of those were lost to a knee injury. But the really significant one for me, and it's something we talk about all the time, is when he was with Northampton, 3 bouts of concussion. And you know, that is, and I think the more we watch modern rugby and the size and the fitness and the strength involved, we are starting to ask harder questions about the sort of injuries that players are suffering, particularly to their brain.
Yeah,
I'd like to see an anatomy of Ruby Walsh with a similar graphic and a similar chart through his injuries over the years, or a comparable jockey, perhaps AP McCoy. But on that, I saw an interview with James Haskell recently, and pretty similar to that. It was just a long list of high impact injuries, muscle injuries, everything like that, and it just really reflects the physical nature of professional rugby now, and especially professional rugby in England too. There seems to be a lot of damage done, but I would actually think any jockey would be more than comparable with that list of injuries, and someone like Ruby, who has had so many bad breaks and bad falls in pursuit of victory, I think would compare. I don't think favourably is the right word, but may even go beyond that.
Yeah. Well, he's 34, Dylan Hartley. I look forward to anatomy of Dylan Hartley in 20 years when he's 54, and we'll see how he's doing. I suspect that's the worry for all of these guys. We're going to take a short break. We have Cliona Foley and Colm Keys with us. Loads of stories to get through. We'll do that in a few moments.
Sign up for News Talk Extra, our email newsletter straight to your inbox. newstalk.com/extra.
Bosch, appliances you can rely on. For peace of mind, choose from Bosch's 5-year warranty range of cooking, laundry and refrigeration. For more information, go to powercity.ie.
When it comes to reviewing your finances, a good place to start is by reviewing your mortgage. It's something few people ever do, but if you never review your mortgage, you'll never know if there might be a better option. That's where the Ulster Bank mortgage team could help. Wherever you bank, be sure to talk to us and see if switching could make a difference. Just search Ulster Bank Switch. Ulster Bank. Help for what matters. Over 18s only. Ulster Bank Ireland DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
The days are getting shorter, and the Tile Style Autumn Sale is now on in our Ballymount showroom, with 40% off almost all tiles, including porcelanosa and florum, 20% off all bathroom and stone, 20% off all wood flooring, including Cars of Sweden. Shop safely at Europe's largest tile, wood and bathroom showroom with exceptional savings while stocks last. The Tile Style Autumn Sale, now on. See tilestyle.ie.
At Home Store and More, all decorative lighting is half price. We've a great selection to choose from that'll bring fresh accent and light to your home. Right now at Home Store and More, all decorative lighting is half price. But better hurry, because when all this half-price decorative lighting is gone, it's gone. Also, make sure not to miss out on our great Halloween decorations, which are all still half price. Shop online at homestoreandmore.ie or drop by and visit us in person at your local Home Store and More. Home Store and More. A happy home.
Afternoons are easy with insuremyvan.ie, Ireland's low-cost van insurance specialist. Get your business back on the road with Insure My Van's best price guarantee. For super savings, visit insuremyvan.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as insuremyvan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
At Audi, we know different people have different milestones. Whether it's your firstborn, saying I do, celebrating a birthday,
Happy birthday!
or even buying your first Audi. Make this milestone one to remember. Enjoy a range of finance offers from the 16th to the 25th of October with the Audi Milestones 2021 sales event.
The COVID-19 Adaptation Fund of €26 million is there to support tourism and hospitality businesses adapt their premises or operations to meet safety guidelines. For example, if you've created an outdoor seating space or installed protective screens and sanitising stations, you may be eligible to receive between €500 and €15,000. The deadline has been extended. You now have until the 31st of October to complete your application. Visit fáilteireland.ie to check if your business is eligible. An initiative of Fáilte Ireland and the Government of Ireland.
Come home to ultra-fast broadband and Sky's best ever Wi-Fi for our lowest ever price, from just €30 a month. So you can now play games, stream music, and download movies at ultra-fast speeds for less than ever before. To switch from just €30 a month for 12 months, search Sky 30. Offer ends 15th of October. Availability subject to location, setup fees, terms and conditions apply. For more info, see sky.ie/speeds.
I hear you some wiring needs a fixing, ma'am. The name's Buzz, on account of my work.
No chance.
Not all cowboys ride horses. All safe electric registered electrical contractors must give you a certificate of completion that shows their work meets approved standards. Find one nearby on safeelectric.ie.
Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards National Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
Good afternoon, I'm Stephen Burke. The Taoiseach isn't ruling out moving the country to level 4 or 5 of COVID restrictions in the week ahead. Micheál Martin says he's very worried by the latest numbers, but insists the current level 3 measures can work. Yesterday saw over 1,000 new cases of coronavirus confirmed in the Republic, and more than 200 people are in hospital today with the disease. The Taoiseach says the government won't be afraid to increase the level of restrictions if that's what's needed.
We're ruling nothing out because the plan provides for moving up levels. We moved from level 2 to level 3 last Tuesday night. We want to see level 2, 3 have an impact, and we want to, give people an opportunity, because going to level 4 would close a lot of companies and businesses and make a lot of people unemployed.
Northern Ireland has recorded 1,066 new cases in the last 24 hours. There's also been one further death. It brings the total number of cases in the north to more than 20,000. 30% of them have been diagnosed in the last week. The Arts Council should be investigated over its decision to cancel a €500,000 communications tender. That's according to a Soc Dems TD. Today, the Sunday Times reports the council terminated the competition last week with no winner, citing costs as the reason. It had advertised the 5-year-long tender in June, seeking communications advice. Gary Gannon, the Soc Dems arts spokesman, says the council should appear before the Oireachtas Arts Committee.
I think when the state engages businesses, small Irish independent businesses, and asks them to engage in a body of work, and then removes that at great cost, I think we have to ask questions about it. I think there's something going on here that we need to discover. We need to ensure that it never happens again. So the only way to do that is to have accountability. And the Arts Council should be held to the same standards as everybody else. So that's why I want an independent investigation into this.
And €4,500 worth of illegal fireworks have been seized in Dublin. Gardaí made the find after searching a van in Walkinstown this morning. Officers are continuing patrols as part of Operation Tombola, targeting the sale of fireworks in the weeks up to Halloween. They say inquiries are continuing into this morning's seizure. That's it for now. More in an hour.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to the AA. For great value home insurance, go online to theaa.ie.
Rain tonight crossing the country heading southeast. It'll be heavy at times, especially in the west and southwest. Lowest temperatures tonight in the east of 4 to 6 degrees, but milder elsewhere. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday papers on Off the Ball.
Now, welcome back. So we've loads to get through. Cliona Foley and Colm Keys are with us. We've touched on the Irish situation. There's a Mazars extract on the front page of the Sunday Times, which we'll come to. There's lots of GAA. There is a questionnaire, Arsene Wenger questioned by our actors, fellow managers, all sorts of celebrities on page 2 of the Sunday Independent. Paul Kimmage is writing about the contaminated feed situation in racing. Joe Brolly is talking about social media Tourette's. Jenny Murphy done a really good interview with Rory Keane in the Mail. David Walsh is charting just how ridiculous the testosterone explanations around British cycling have become, and they are ridiculous. There's European final preview in the rugby, including Peter O'Reilly with Mike Prendergast, who's having a very successful year and career increasingly. And then the IABA, Irish boxing, just cannot seem to sort itself out. Sean McGoldrick is a very dense, detailed piece in the Sunday Independent. If we broadly jump off on a GAA footing, Cliona, where do you want to start? A number of pieces, be it Nicky English, Shane McGrath talking about the GAA decision on Monday to stop club games. There's the Camogie CEO in the Sunday Independent. I guess they're all interlinked.
Yeah. I think probably Shane McGrath's piece is just sort of reflects, I suppose, the seriousness of it. The headline on it could have been, "Now is the winter of our discontent," but he's, basically pointing out that, this hope, I suppose, that we all are clinging to for so many people, including older people in this country, for whom the GA is their social lifeline. We're hoping to get into it. I really liked the Nicky English piece as well with Mick Clifford in the Irish Mail on Sunday, because I just even like the start of it where he asks him, who's going to win the All-Ireland, and Nick English straight up says, who knows? And I just really like the honesty of that. So often we're all pretending to be experts, but at the moment, who knows anything about anything? And it's just a really honest piece. And also what I really liked about it as well is I keep thinking in my head that, the quality of the All-Ireland Championship, if it goes ahead, and we're all fingers crossed, won't be as good because it's going to be winter football and winter hurling, completely different than what we'd normally be used to. And I've been kind of puzzling my head saying, who's that going to suit most? But in fact, Nick English cuts through all of that nonsense in this and says, actually, it's probably not going to affect the hurling standard at all, because the matches are going to be played on all of the top pitches. And I thought that was a really interesting point to make. But he does say if they start, if it starts, it's got to finish. The kind of way he was saying, like, it just won't work if it starts and then it gets stopped and then they're finishing it next year. That is not what anybody wants. We just want it to start and keep going. But he makes some really relevant points about that. And also, the lack of crowds. And Jonathan Norcroft has a very good piece in the Sunday Times today about the effect of the lack of crowds on professional football. And Nick English makes a very good point here. And he says that actually, he says some of the best games I ever saw were A and B internal games prior to the start of the championship, where players are fighting for their spaces. Inter-county hurlers have a serious competitive streak. So you'd be surprised, he was saying, at the standard and the ferocity of it, even though there won't be crowds there.
The GA decision to shut down club games is discussed across the papers as well, Colm. The GA had no defence this time, guilty as charged, said Colm O'Rourke. And yet on the back page, Eamon Sweeney talks about how the GA were a bit spooked. Why did the decision need to be made on Monday? Would it not have been wiser, given there have been very few matches played until the weekend, to hold off for a couple of days? GA said they acted in the interest of public safety. What was your read on that decision?
Pat Spillane has a piece as well where initially he didn't agree with it, and as the week went on, he then agreed with it. So you have Eamon Sweeney against it, you've Colm O'Rourke for it, and you've Pat Spillane who's a bit of both. So it really depends where you're coming from. I think on balance it was the right call, because Eamon Sweeney obviously references the number of cases, Blackrock, the Meath final when the teams huddled together, the case of the Waterford club player who played awaiting a test that turned out positive. So you have a number of cases that are high profile, but there are so many more cases that are known of and incidents that are known of that maybe haven't come come into the public domain. Celebrations at all levels, ladies, camogie, not so much underage obviously, but junior leagues, anywhere where there's a cup, there is a desire to celebrate, irrespective of whether the country and indeed the world are gripped in a pandemic. And one of the things that will be coming out of the GA chairs meeting that was held on Thursday night, and indeed was being advised beforehand, is for county boards to retain the cups, hand them out and take them straight back, because they see that as a source of much as what's going on. Even from a GA point of view, their own units were letting them down on this. They were letting in far more into county finals and other games than what was the permitted 200. So from that point of view, even close to home, things they could control, they weren't able to control it. And you could see it at games where there was very little social distancing in stands. And as the weather got worse, they were going to come together even more to shelter under whatever shelter was there. So that obviously didn't create a good look. I think they took decision to get out in front of the criticism. Took it early, 1:00 on a Monday. It was very, very swift. But while they cannot control what happens later on in the evening, they can do something about the source. And the source are the games and the finals. And as cases rose, and we saw them rise pretty significantly even since Monday, I felt on balance it's the right decision. Eamon Sweeney does make the point that the GAA are effectively acknowledging that they can't control. Well, these aren't things that they can control, but what they've done here is taken out the source. And until the public health climate starts to change back in the right direction, I think we'll see some of these games still on ice for quite a few weeks and months yet.
As for the inter-county picture, Alan Milton here on Monday used the word forfeit when it came to inter-county matches. Fergal McGill has used that as well. So it seems a distinct possibility that we're going to have inter-county games forfeited. Now, they desperately don't want to do that when it comes to All-Ireland semi-finals or finals, and they may well go into 2021. Obviously, nobody particularly wants that. But we are looking at a championship like no other, Colm, and you know, how many players is enough for a manager to pull the plug? 5, 6, 7, 8 players?
If you're Dublin, let's say, and you lose some players, you're going to adequately, in some cases, you're going to be able to fill that void. Kerry are going to be able to fill that void. You take Fermanagh, where it's thought that there's maybe 8 to 10 players have contracted it. I'm not sure of the figure. That's obviously something that they'll keep to themselves. But if Fermanagh were not able to call on these players for the game against Clare, how deep can a county like that go before they say there's no point to this? So that's the problem. It's a question of the weak getting that bit weaker and the strong being able to stay at a certain level, and that's the difficulty for the GAA. It depends on who and it depends on where, and there will be pressure on to defer games, even though they've clearly said no forfeit. Or forfeits games will be forfeited. They said that back in June. We will have to move on. There is no facility here to put games off. But I can see it, that when it actually comes to a team that's in a strong position and they're losing players, the pressure will come on to defer games and defer the championship effectively, because there is very, very few windows. There are windows for some of the hurling provincial finals that they can, after between semi-finals and finals, there's windows there. There's obviously windows between provincial finals and All-Ireland semi-finals where teams might get, a little bit of latitude, but not much. But the effect may be we will see a January 2021 conclusion. But that's to say that if the championship gets underway at all, because while it can continue on at level 4, as it's prescribed in the plans at the moment, it can't go to level 5, although there is some talk that further dispensation will be given to elite sport in level 5 so that a championship can continue. But I think players would have to wonder, well, we're being asked to go out into level 5. If that was the case, we're being asked to go out and crisscross the country and go training, go out and circulate and all of that among ourselves in level 5, where everybody else is being kept indoors, so to speak. So I think they would ask questions about their commitment as amateur players in that regard. So really there has to be a question mark yet as cases rise, and we'll see how the week plays out on that front. But there has to be a question mark. The GAA will do extraordinarily well to get to the end of this unscathed and on schedule.
I would tend to agree. A huge question mark. The headline above Sinead McNulty's interview, Cliona, is "We have to work hard to make sure All Irelands happen safely." No kidding. So the Camogie Championships start on Saturday. Kilkenny will play Waterford. Yeah. So,
out of interest, just to show, I think the interesting thing as well is that these aren't professional players, and a lot of them work on the front lines in loads of different jobs. So for a variety of reasons, if they felt in any danger, or that they were bringing any danger to their work colleagues or to their families or whatever, they're perfectly reasonable for them to say, no, I'm out of this. And I think that's the difference between the GAA, we'll say, and professional sport, where they're being paid to play. These guys and girls are not being paid to play. So yes, the CEO of the Camogie Association has a piece with Dara Cahor today in the Sunday Independent, and she's saying that as well, that we have to work very hard to make sure these All-Irelands even happen safely. And they're very tight, they're very restricted. They've lessened their games as well, both in women's football and Camogie. One of the things I thought was interesting about this piece, and I'm surprised it hasn't got more coverage really, given the amount of furore there was over during the week, is the issue of dual players. I presume this interview took place before yesterday's Camogie Congress, but at the Camogie Congress yesterday, I think I've only seen one person, I think it was in The Sun today, covering the fact that there was a proposal by Dublin County Board that Camogie would in some way facilitate their inter-county or dual players, and it was badly defeated. And it isn't really mentioned here, but at the same time, I think it's interesting. He does ask about the dual player scenario, and she says she's asked, should we try and schedule more comprehensively together? That's ladies football and Camogie. And she said, yes, I think we should. But when you consider we're sharing facilities or borrowing facilities from GA colleagues, you're in a bit of a minefield. Dual players is a big challenge for us, and we have it in a number of counties. But I think we also have to think about our players who play other sports. So not alone do we have players who play Camogie and ladies football, but athletes who play other sports, that you list them off. But I think that's a dodge on the question, really, because the reality is that it doesn't involve a lot of players. It involves very few counties who have dual players, and it seems to me it would be very simply done for the two organisations to sit down and find a way that they don't have to play matches on the same day or on the same weekend. There's not a lot of players involved here, and it doesn't really involve players who play other sports at that level. You're talking about elite ladies Gaelic football. But yeah, I mean, it isn't simple for any sporting organisation at the moment, and that's the reality. But I think like Colm is right, this is going to affect the counties that don't have the same depth of number. That is a real factor as well. So if you have counties that have great numbers of players, and you have to, people have to be quarantined, you may still be able to. But what about the weaker counties that don't have, the greater numbers of players even to continue? And I think, everybody will be within their right. I just, for example, like there was press conferences for the Camogie to launch the Camogie Championship this weekend, and I think three of the players were all worked in medical services in one respect or another, nurses.
Right. I think the answer to that question will be tough luck, won't it? When we say, what about the smaller counties? Isn't that the short answer? Tough luck. We got to move on. That is
the short answer. And the other thing is a restriction of 32 has been placed on inter-county squads. So if you're missing 8 or 10 players, you're down to 22 or 24. If you have any other injuries or any other unavailability, you really are going to be stretched. And you're down to the point where you will say, this is not for us. I would imagine at the moment there are a lot of the weaker teams, the less successful teams, are really wondering, what's the point to all of this championship? I just get that sense from a couple of counties that they're really just ticking a box here, getting on with, getting the games played and looking to see what 2021
I would tend to agree. If you're a minnow, and I use that word respectfully, going up against Dublin, Kerry, Cork, Galway or Mayo anytime soon, how can there be much intensity to your training? Let's go, let's take our beating and let's get back to normal life. That's invariably the atmosphere, and it's not fair, but I would say that's the reality. Above that, it seems we're on the piece with Sinead McNulty and the Camogie. Paul Kimmage has ultimately spoken to Aidan O'Brien at the end of his piece. We did it for the integrity of the sport. This is the story which has rumbled on for the last 8, 9, 10 days or so. Contaminated feed left O'Brien's with no choice but to pull pin on ARC bid. Paul starts off here by talking about France Gallup. They're the governing body in France, and they test 30,000 thoroughbreds a year, 3 times more than the French anti-doping agency for all other sports. So the point is, they are very serious about maintaining the integrity of racing over in France. The feed which came from Gain was contaminated with a substance, zylpaterol, which is unlicensed in Europe, but is used in the US and elsewhere to promote weight gain, and mainly in cattle. So the feed was contaminated, it went out to various places, and none of the horses who tested positive were named. So France Gallup didn't name them. Gain cited privacy with their client, which I can understand in some respects. Yesterday, the Irish Field reported that all recent winners in Ireland and England had returned post-race negative tests for zylpaterol. But ultimately, Aidan O'Brien came forward, and we're pulling all our horses, and this is why, and made it public. And so Paul Kimmage just speaks to him towards the end of the piece. We couldn't run the horses on Sunday, said Aidan O'Brien, with the risk of anything being positive, and we felt we had to withdraw them for the integrity of the sport. Integrity is priceless, but it doesn't always feel that way, writes Paul. Aidan O'Brien says, you might not always like it might not feel great at the time, but you have to do it. That's what I've always believed. Paul asks, doesn't it seem absurd that you're the only trainer we know whose horse has tested positive for this? I know, laughs O'Brien, I know, but what could we do? When we were informed it was possible the horses could test positive, we had to do the tests. Now, you could say we shouldn't have done them and that come race time they might have been okay, but we thought it was the right thing to do. You're not sore about it? No. Listen, there are so many things that go for you and against you in so many different ways. You just do your best, accept the result and move on. Cliona, the ultimate point here is if Aidan O'Brien hadn't come forward and been so open, we'd still know very, very little about all of this.
Yes, and I think that's really interesting. And I think just the way I tuned in to watch the Arc after and noticed even just the way it's presented, doping is presented in horse racing. It interests me because I always think it always seems to be presented as, oh, dreadful accident here. Somebody ate something, wrong. And, it was, it's the feed is the problem. And if horse racing wants people to believe that it is as clean as it is, then they need to be more transparent or as transparent as other sports. And as he says, if 5 horses tested positive, why don't we know whose 5 horses they were? Aidan O'Brien is the only one who has come out and said it and, has shown commendable integrity for that. But I just thought it was very interesting the way the whole thing was presented. And I do think that there's a variety of standards applied to sports when it comes to doping. And I just think even how they're covered in the media and their own media is very interesting as well. And that's my point about it. I just think there's a lot of double standards goes on about doping, or accidental or otherwise, because we know athletes can take tainted substances as well, and have in the past managed to show that they accidentally took something. So if it was accidental, why don't we know? And I thought it was interesting. It's an interesting article from that point of view.
In this instance, Gain have come out and said it was our feed. There was definitely a contamination. We've confirmed that. We're trying to figure out why it happened. Colm, your thoughts? I know you keep an eye on the racing.
Yeah, Joe, I think the point of this piece is to show Aidan O'Brien as a man of honour, maybe by comparison to a lot of other sports where that same sense of responsibility isn't always there, and that same sense of integrity isn't always there. I think maybe that's what Paul Kimmage is trying to do here, to shine that light on Aidan O'Brien and his practices. One of the striking things about it here is he chronicles first the Thursday night that he learned about it, and the results were expected back at 12 o'clock on the Thursday night before the Arc. So that's about 10 days ago now at this stage. And he says, so straight away the alarm bells are ringing in my head, and it goes through the sleepless night that he has, obviously at home, where he's waiting for the results back. And I think it's the results of horses that are going to be in action on the Friday and the Saturday and even the Sunday. So the results come back at 6 o'clock in the morning. But he actually, he says he didn't sleep at 1 o'clock. They didn't have it. 2 o'clock came. So right through the night, Aidan O'Brien is not sleeping as he awaits for results, having, on the point of a decision not to run his horses. So it portrays him as very conscientious on this particular matter. You would expect that. Racing is a business as much as it is a sporting pursuit, obviously. And I think the purpose of that is to show Aidan O'Brien and his team he's a man of honour.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why there would be such a kind of cloud of secrecy about the whole thing, especially when Gain had come out and said this was our mistake. I don't know why the others might not come forward or why it's not named as a matter of course. I guess
there obviously doesn't seem to be any culpability on the part of the
trainers,
the owners, trainers.
No, far from it.
It's an accepted mistake from the.
There's no stigma coming
providers.
out saying it was us. There's no issue there. I guess what it points to, even in this case, which is not a tricky case, where Gain have come out and held their hands up straight away, and there's this level of secrecy, that if there is something more sinister ever happening at any other points, not talking about anybody involved here, that that atmosphere of secrecy is even more dangerous, because it's very hard to get answers even when it's a fairly straightforward case, let alone a trickier one. I guess that's part of the point as well.
And it is a sport, remember, as well, where somebody could nobble a horse. Do you know what I mean? So it is a sport where there are instances where there's a lot at stake and a lot of money. And I just think there's, how do we look at sports and look at their integrity? And he's absolutely right. The Irish Field, he says, came out and reported that all the recent winners in Ireland and England, they came out with a report yesterday. saying that and they named those winners and said they were all in the clear. There was no problem with any of those. But it does seem strange that if Aidan O'Brien comes out and says, yes, we had horses that tested positive for this tainted substance, why didn't other trainers do it?
Just to overleaf, I just wanted to give it a quick mention. Joe Brawley is writing about, I guess you're talking about the GAA community, but it's really just the world at large. I don't know, did either of you watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix anytime recently? It's worth a watch. Basically, it's just a bunch of people who worked in all the big social media companies, be it Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or you name it, a bunch I haven't even heard of. And they're all just pleading, saying, this thing's out of control, it needs to be regulated, it's just ruining lives, you know? And it definitely stuck with me. So Joe Brawley is just, and I'm not going to get into any of the specific cases, and I should emphasize, he doesn't name names either. But I think if you have a smartphone, there's a chance you recognize some of these stories, which is almost the point. And he's talking about GAA people all around the country spreading stuff. And he calls it social media Tourette's. And the automatic response to any event at the moment is to film it, publicise it. Social media Tourette's does not permit the sufferer to decide between what's acceptable, enjoyable, stupid, disloyal, dangerous, a gross breach of privacy, or even a criminal act. Most distressing is the glee with which many people in the GAA community are now happy to spread vile gossip, photographs and videos about other GAA members. And he talks about, as I said, several instances, publicly naming and shaming just for the fun of it, and never happened back in his day. Obviously, there were no camera phones. And again, talks about certain instances, which I suspect many of you with your smartphone would recognise. The point here is, you know, you take the 10 seconds, you laugh at it, and often it's forwarded on to a group. And I think, Colm, it's definitely a GAA thing as much as anything. Like around celebrations of local championship wins or matches, camera phones are out, things seem to be happening. And the word in the headline is the scourge of social media. It is a scourge, and it probably is damaging, no probably about it, damaging people's lives.
Of course it is, and a couple of the cases that he mentions, I recognise those. As it seems you do too, but it's probably endemic in every part of society, not just GAA, but every part. But yes, around county final time, around this time of year, you will get a lot more. And just as we were discussing celebrations being videoed in the context of leading to the shutdown of activity, I think it's reflective in this too, that almost everything is put up there, and there's no discretion from those videoing, and they think they're passing it on obviously in private, but once it gets into the WhatsApp domain, it travels everywhere. It's like the virus itself, it just moves, and it's almost impossible to stem at that stage.
Like even I was thinking, Cliona, I remember the Ballyraga thing blew up, you know, a year or two ago, and like young people's photos on the front pages of newspapers, and you're thinking, they have to go to college, they have to go and get a job interview, they have to start the whole lives ahead of them, and I'm not sure about the ethics of this, to be honest.
Well, you see, it's a bit like, I mean, it is like how we're handling COVID at the moment. It's basically down to personal responsibility, you know. Brawley talks about one particular case where, you know, somebody sent him one, and, you know, he cleared it off, he deleted it, and rang the person who sent it to him and said, you know, don't ever send me anything like that again. And it's easy for people to have, you know, a quick laugh at somebody's expense, particularly when they're strangers, you know. I think the thing about social media is people say things on it that they would never, ever, ever say to anybody's face, and never, ever, ever share with anybody whose respect they want to keep. But it's easy to do it as an anonymous person. Yeah, you're right in everything, but it's exactly like the COVID situation in that, you know, it's down to all of us to police this stuff and not to get involved in it. And if anybody sends us something, then you challenge them on it. You know, it's not enough to send back a little emoji laughing, you know, or whatever. And even it's not enough. It's, you know, it's like the discussions we've been having on racism and every other type of discrimination. It's not enough sometimes even to ignore it, but you have to challenge it. You know, unless you're the one, are you going to be the one in the WhatsApp group that actually says, come on, this isn't on, and we've got to, you know, let's everybody clear this stuff off and nobody share it, because there's people's lives involved here.
Yeah. I thought it was just a good piece. The Social Dilemma is worth a watch, by the way. Nothing in it will overly surprise you, but just the level of cynicism on the part of those big companies is frightening, you know. And all the people who worked for those companies, like they had the guy there from YouTube who designed the recommended videos. You know, like, geez, we've all been down YouTube holes and an hour goes by. Like the very guy who designed that and has left the company, all these people, the guy who was in charge of monetization at Facebook, they're all involved in this documentary, and they're just saying things like, you know, we need to design technology that's humane. That's the type of language they're using, that we are just almost abusing humans, the extent to which we're making this stuff addictive, like we have no chance. And they were all saying that they are often addicted to certain platforms themselves, even though they knew the algorithms behind making it addictive. And that is before we get into, you know, the influence of fake news on your Facebook feed and how that's just creating all sorts of problems for democracy. It's worth the watch anyway. So that's Joe Brawley on the scourge of social media. Tourette's inflicting terrible trauma is the headline in the world of GA. Where do we go next? Something totally different. Maybe Jenny Murphy with Rory Keane.
Yeah, and actually, Joe, it absolutely connects with this, really. The headline is words are very important, but it's your example, not your opinion, that counts. And I think this is really interesting. Jenny Murphy, ex-Ireland international, and we were talking about this last week. She, along with Alison Miller and Fiona Hayes, have got involved in an independent, setting up an independent with an independent company in Leinster, setting up an Irish under-20 women's team. There doesn't exist one now.
I was surprised at that, because when I first read they're setting up their own academy to set up an under-20s women team independent of the RFU. I thought, God, is this some kind of coup?
Yeah, no, they released this information last week, and it's an independent professional company, rugby company in Leinster that are doing it, but they're looking for recruits from across the country, and it's really interesting. So they've decided that it's not happening at national level. The national governing body isn't doing this, but actually there's something we feel strongly about, and we feel that this would be a way to lift the standard of younger players, help them make the transition into senior national, international level. And I believe that they have set up friendly internationals with the England under-20s at least already. So it's a really interesting innovation. And really what she's saying is we should be willing to innovate. And in women's sport, very often we need innovators. And to see ex-internationals involved in innovation is really interesting. But I think it does link with that thing about personal responsibility, if you like. So she's saying it's not enough to talk about this stuff. We've all been talking about it. Actually, we decided to go off and do something. And I didn't know that she had, it's a very good piece with Rory Keane in the Mail on Sunday. She had actually planned to go down to New Zealand this year and play in Auckland, because she met some of the Kiwis when she played for the Barbarians last winter. So that never happened, and it's great to see her here. One of the most committed, internationals you'll ever see in any sport. Put her head usually where people would fear to put their boots. And her whole point is, if we can do anything to raise the standard, then more people will come. And if more people come to watch the Irish women's team, then more sponsors, more coverage. It's this rollover. That's what they're looking for. So it's a really interesting piece. And as I said, to me, it does link back with this thing, even about social media. It's about personal responsibility. One point she makes, which I think is really interesting, and it's something that I feel really strongly about as well, which is, she's saying the Irish men's team may be out at the Euros, but the Irish women's team have a game coming up. She was a very good soccer player herself in her day, and they're still in the Euros. So can you support them? And it's this notion as well of team of us. If you support the Irish men's rugby team, do you support Ireland, or do you just support only the men's team? And same with soccer. She's asking that question of, again, of fans is, are you going to talk about it? Is it just going to be lip service? Or are you actually going to get out there when we can get back on the terraces? Or, even use your power if you are logging on to a match to watch it in a streaming service or live or whatever. All those eyes and attendances help women's sport to grow. And they get the sort of investment that will give more time to players to learn technical skills and to move up the grades.
Yeah, she's encouraging even people who haven't played before to think about getting involved. She only started at 19. She said she'd played GAA and soccer in her younger years. And she talks about volunteerism. She says, it's great now, when I go training with Old Belvedere, you see that. You see people volunteer, give their time, mothers, fathers, and the Belvo coaches. Ollie Campbell will go out to training sessions. He'll go to men's games and the women's games. He'll go to the minis. He's just part of the club. I can't speak for Ollie, but he seems to give just as much for the male section as the female section, and for a player of his talent, it just means a lot. I suspect it does. So, she's
she's making that point as well, that like we are starting to see the first wave of young Irish female rugby players, people like Baby Parsons and Judy Bobbitt. We're starting to see them. They come through having played rugby from very young age.
Yeah.
But most of Jenny's cohort, a lot of them took up rugby much later in life because they were good at another sport, and it was only a growing sport at that time.
I presume, Cliona, we're going to see a quantum leap. Like, I talk to so many athletes now, like Louise Galvin even the other day, who's retired from the Sevens circuit. So, you know, she's early 30s, but her story is of like, well, I played with the boys up until I was mid-teens, and then there was no team for me. So I didn't play Gaelic football again until, you know, I was in college. Like, even just to walk around my own area, there are dozens of female teams of all ages training all the time. So you've got to think pretty soon we're going to have the first batch who were given equal opportunity with the boys, trained all the way through, and now in their 20s, you know, the standard is just going to jump several rungs on that ladder.
Absolutely. And even like somebody like Anna Capeless, who's a brilliant player with the Irish senior team at the moment. Again, she played other sports and took it up later in life. It's extraordinary. Even still, we aren't getting the greater numbers, but I think probably I'd say give it another 5 or 6 years. You know, you're going to have a team that's made up of, the Irish women's team will be totally made up of players who have played it from a very young age, because now clubs are setting up and there's brilliant underage structures there, and so many people are working. But what's really, as I said, what really encouraged me about this under-20 thing is that 3 brilliant former players have taken it upon themselves to go off and do this independently.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that there wasn't a team already. I just assumed there was. So
they've only recently. You see, it's only recently that there's enough growth really even to have an under-18 league. You know, so that's still a growth area.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's Jenny Murphy with Rory Keane, pages 68 and 69 in the Mail. Like, that's mirrored, isn't it, column across GA as well? Like, the number of female teams has just grown exponentially, I would suspect, in the last decade.
Yeah, growth is huge. It really is, and obviously reflected in the crowds that go to the at the pinnacle event, that go to the All Ireland Ladies Finals every year. Certainly in ladies football, huge growth there. But you can see it. I mean, you walk around your area. I know around my area, there's just phenomenal interest in getting teams out, and I find that the retention levels are much better per capita of player at ladies than it is in the men's games. That more will continue playing through minor and into adult as a percentage than the drop-off rate, I think, and this is, I haven't seen any numbers that will reflect this, but that's my sense of it, that they stay with the game for longer than some of their male counterparts. So from that point of view, that would bode well for the future of, certainly of ladies Gaelic football.
Okay. Funny, I was talking to Vera Pow recently, and she was saying the best female players all played with boys growing up, and so that's the next kind of phase of this discussion. How do we maximise the talent? She said absolutely the best players all played with boys to a certain point, and there's ways of integration which will not hamper the development of boys, but will
to the age of 12, up to the age of 12, they can integrate. That's certain.
Currently, yeah. I think she was even advocating a bit later in certain circumstances where size and physicality hasn't become too big an issue. Right, clock is right against us. So, like I mentioned, David Walsh on the madness at Team Sky. There is Sean McGoldrick on the IABA. That's quite a dense piece, but like strife there. You had Peter O'Reilly with Mike Prendergast. Cliona, I know probably not going to have time to get through all of these. If I had to push you for one, Cliona, to sum up or point people towards.
Well, I think John McGoldrick's piece is a very interesting piece in the Sunday Indo, simply because people always ask, you know, why we had such successful boxers. Why is there still seem to be always problems in the IABA, and what is it? And you basically have a central council who are voted in, and then you have a board of directors, and there's even conflict between who gets nominated onto the central council. And this is a particular case of one individual person who should have been on the central council, wasn't accepted by the board of directors. He should have been on the board of directors from his position as president of Munster. So for people who often wonder why is there complications, have a read of this piece, and then you will understand the difficulties at play.
Yeah, it seemed incredibly messy, I have to say, but Sean McGoldrick's laid it all out there in the Sunday Independent. And you wanted to mention as well, Cliona, sorry, we should mention Pat Hooper, I think.
Yeah, Pat Hooper died suddenly. A man whose name, his family, the Hoopers, are synonymous with Irish marathon running. But and Pat was less known than his brother Dick, but he died at the weekend, and just too young. And just, do you know what? He was a 2:17 marathon runner. He ran in the Olympics. But that isn't why people in Irish athletics loved him. They loved him because he was an extraordinary volunteer, not just for his club, Raheny Shamrocks, and Shane McGrath has a lovely small piece, and it's just lovely to see him recognised, because without people like Pat Hooper, Irish sport wouldn't exist.
Okay, well, look, we'll finish on that note. Thanks so much for your time, both of you. Cliona Foley of the Off the Bench podcast and journalist. Colm Keys of the Irish Independent as well, who's got a busy couple of months coming up. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Cliona.
Off the Ball on News Talk.